Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app. And we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. We learn from tech leaders weekly on this show, and the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fact: researchers at Meta AI, the research arm of the company formerly called Facebook, achieved a breakthrough in understanding how the human brain learns language that could lead to human-level AI trained with little or no supervision. Human brains learn language from just a few million sentences, whereas AI models typically require billions to achieve the same level of intelligence. Researchers expect that number will decrease exponentially as we learn more about how humans process language. We'll be talking more about that in upcoming shows. But shifting to this week's conversation, every organization across every industry is being reimagined through the lens of technology. On this podcast, as you know, we've learned how industries as diverse as construction, mining, and law enforcement are combining human and machine intelligence to rewire how we live and work. Today, we get to learn how one of the most iconic companies on the planet uses AI to improve operations and build brand loyalty. McDonald's operates 40,000 restaurants in 200 geographic markets around the world and feeds around 70 million people every day. The complexity of the systems and supply chains and people required to make that happen is incomprehensible. Few people on the planet understand the technology required to operate at that scale better than today's guest. Joel Eagles is Senior Director of Technology and Architecture at McDonald's, having spent a career in and around technology as a leader and a visionary. Joel's held similar roles in healthcare and other industries before joining McDonald's in 2012. Joel has helped design many of the back-end cloud technologies that power the Golden Arches. I learn something from Joel every time we hang out, and honestly, most of the time it has nothing to do with technology. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome my friend Joel Eagle to the podcast. Joel, let's get started by having you share a little bit, maybe more about your background and how you got into this space.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for inviting me on your podcast. You know, you maybe give me a lot of credit there for designing things. There's a huge team here at McDonald's and suppliers we have around the world that all contribute to what you see as a consumer on we'll say the consumer side of the cash register, or what you see as an experience from a digital or mobile app. But as we'll get into later, we'll talk a little about how McDonald's, or why I think anyway, McDonald's QSR app is the number one downloaded QSR app in the world by far, and what that's done to power what has been in 2021 the most successful year in McDonald's history. We can get into some of that as to why that is. But how I got here, I grew up a bit in the in the IT space. I started off my life thinking I could be a computer scientist. To determine I wasn't smart enough to be a computer scientist, and so I learned to do programming and other things. And I got interested in networking back when that was becoming a thing. We were moving from mainframe terminals to network devices, servers. Client server was taking off, and that's sort of where I started my career. And I did that, as you mentioned, for a number of years in healthcare. Saw a lot of automation things put in around call centers. If you can think about, I remember when the days were when you called into a healthcare provider or an insurance company, if you will, and we had, based on who you were, when the agent answered the phone, your claim or your process popped up automatically in front of them. They didn't have to go search for it. Some of the early types of automation like that that been in existence, and we're going back to the 90s, right? When that was put in place, kind of coming to that from IVRs, the voice recorders. So, started there. Again, stayed largely in the infrastructure space. Have a keen interest in efficiency and automation of things. Sort of built my a career around that. Ended up doing some work from healthcare to we call logistics. Worked for a worldwide global logistics company, and there it was about things like how do you automate in the warehouse, if you will, right? If you think about the number of transactions, a very small margin business. However, you have to think about ways to be accurate, be on time, be quick. That company, for example, ran the Apple warehouse, right? So they if you ordered an iPod during that time, you got it managed by this company. But one of the automation things there that always struck me was when I found out was, in order to check order accuracy, they would weigh a box. So your box might have 15 different items in a memory chips or whatever it might be in a box. And instead of, we were thinking about at that point, advancing RFID technology. I can talk about how we're doing some of that. But at that point, the box was loaded, or pickers put things in a box. Box is sent down the conveyor belt, and on the way down, without stopping, it's weighed. And we know within like a micro of an ounce whether or not the order was correct because of what it should weigh. And that's how you check. That's how you automated the QA piece of the order shipping. And it really had an effect of leaping forward. You as a consumer getting satisfied that you got what you ordered, right, in a multi-order box. I saw some of that happen. And then coming to McDonald's, when I first arrived at McDonald's, technology was beginning to be, I think it was on the cusp of driving technology. There's a famous quote by Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, that said he only wanted to see two things on the counter, right? That was food going out and money basically coming in. And I think his quote was, we could run the restaurant from I think he said cigar box. We call it shoebox today. We're a little more nice about it. But the point is, the restaurant could run itself, and you could, the local manager, the owner operator, we call them, could run effectively that restaurant. You move now to automated inventory, right? We do inventory now is not based on you counting things in the storeroom. It's based on knowing what was sold that day and auto filling that. And then that information, as you can imagine, coming from 40,000 places, goes out to our vast supplier network, and those types of things are automated. When I was thinking about getting into McDonald's, I thought there's a lot of opportunity here to do much more around what they were going to do and go on that technology journey. And of course, today we have digital applications, right, that we rely on. And I'll speak to that a bit. But if you think about the impact of digital on a McDonald's company, at first most people don't seem to make the connection. But the volumes of things that we do around the world require a great deal of discipline, actually, from people who work at McDonald's to understand how to operate. And we're focused a lot on how do we make that easier for them? Like, how do we make that easier for the crew? Believing that if it's easier for the crew, it's better for the consumer.
I mentioned that most of the time we hang out, I learn something from you that has nothing to do with technology. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is the leadership culture at McDonald's. What happens to keep millions of crew members and corporate employees motivated and so loyal to the brand at McDonald's?
Yeah, I think there's what I'll tell you is, and I'm sure everyone's felt the effect of COVID around the world and the work from home. If you think about office workers, we got to work from home. Most of us, while it was trying times and certainly difficult for the world. If you think about people in restaurants, QSR, there's no you're not working from home, right? You have to be there to make the food, or greet guests. So there's a number of things that were challenging and in many countries around the world, because we operate in roughly 120 of them in different legislation and being impacted differently by by COVID. It forced us to think about their experience more. It forced us to think more about making it. How do we make employees feel engaged while they're remote, and then challenges that everyone would have faced. I think at McDonald's, the approach is, and we did this, it's similar to when we used to be in call centers. One of the things we used to say, and as a key performance indicator of customer satisfaction, if you will, is, are your call center agents happy? Are the employees happy? Are the employees feeling good about where they work? And that is a strong indication of how well your consumers are feeling about your products or services, right? Again, not direct, but it's good KPI. So at McDonald's, the focus, I would say, in the last few years has been on the crew. What does it take for them to do their job? How do we simplify that job? How do we make learning easier? As you can imagine, by the time you get to working the grill or working different stations within a restaurant, there's a lot of education that goes to that. And what I would say to your listeners is, don't think of, or the next time you go to McDonald's, try not to think about it from a restaurant perspective. Think about that behind the counter as a mini factory. You're walking into the front of a factory and you're asking for something, and many different ingredients and parts and SKUs and things, and people that know their process and know where they need to be, all make something happen that you experience as a meal, right? You think you're getting a meal. There's many things that go into that. So automation is something that we like to think about in terms of, you've probably seen things like the fryers that will automatically lift the fries, or there's buttons or alarms that go off to tell you, hey, you got something going on, or little helpful things that help people just make their job easier, if you will. But one area that's still a part of opportunity for us is just the basic operations. As we all know, I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to this, is sometimes you go to a restaurant and they don't have what you're asking for, right? And the reason is because something is broken right inside the restaurant. So we'll pick on things like, an ice cream machine or something like that is broken. And so, little Sally's not going to get what she wants. And as a parent, it's not a good experience. Well, to deal with that issue, the crew has to do a number of things operationally. They've got to call somebody, they're telling someone, or even if it's got a smart piece of equipment, there's still the idea of interfacing with the repair of that piece of equipment, because they don't self-repair, right? So there's a number of things that go on with that you got to make sure, if someone's coming out to fix it, you deal with that, or you've got a ticket called into the help desk, and a number of things that you take your eye off the ball of the consumer. And where we envision the future is, yes, progressing with some smart equipment that can phone home, if you will. But if you think about the job of a shift supervisor at McDonald's, which I think is probably the hardest job at McDonald's, dealing with a number of variables, imagine the scenario is the soft serve machine is broken. You have digital menu boards advertising soft serve, kiosks out front selling soft serve, point of sale up front selling soft serve, drive-through selling soft serve, and a mobile app sending people to your restaurant to get soft serve ice cream. You as a shift supervisor got to call it in that it's broken. We have some back-end systems that'll help not direct you to the restaurant that doesn't have that. Once we know that, we have that clear. But then you've got to go around and tell the drive-through person, stop selling that. The cashier person, stop selling that. You can do nothing about that digital menu board at the moment. But the issue that we see in the future is the shift supervisor or someone decides that something's broken. They touch a wearable on their person and they speak to it and say, shake machine's broken. And that's it, because we know where you are, who you are, when the maintenance was performed, what time of day it is, what day part it is, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We know to take appropriate action. We pull it off automatically. We pull it off the digital menu board. We stop offering at the kiosk. If you're on your way in your car, we say, hey, there's been a problem, go to this other McDonald's. But all that happens in the background. The important thing, though, is the only thing that supervisor sees next is a little note that says there are 2 customers in the drive-through queue that aren't going to get their shake that have already ordered it. So you have to do nothing about the prevention of the problem. Now you stop and you focus on that consumer and you go and engage that consumer. It's going to be disappointing to the consumer, but maybe you offer something different. And I want to get at what that is. But the point is, you engage the consumer, not have them deal with all the stress on the back end. This would be an example of where we're trying to go.
So from touring restaurants with you, I now go into a McDonald's, and what I see is essentially a computer with a grill and a fridge, and everything else is technology. But to those listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with that digital or the technology behind the experience, maybe talk through some of the technologies from the app to the curbside ordering, things that are going on behind the scenes that are directly related to technology.
Yeah, if you think about the days of old where you could drive up, or everything you did was talking to a person, right, to get your order done, right? So the most obvious change in that is, effectively by restaurants and let's face it, for retail in general, they've moved the point of sale to you, the consumer. They've literally put it on your phone, right? So you browse through the menus and you make your choice. Well, now, if you think about it, you as the consumer are learning to be the order taker, right? You're putting in your own order. That still has to get tied back into what runs the restaurant, right? The computer, if you will, that tells the various stations make French fries or make a fillet of fish or make something, right? And it parses out that order, because you still at one point want to get it, whether you did it through Uber Eats delivery or something like that. You still got to take what you asked for and convert it into all of those things that make it happen in the factory. And then there's a delivery piece that comes back to you, track all that, et cetera, right? So a lot of that has changed. In the restaurant, if you think about some of the AI specific things, you've heard in the news where McDonald's recently we purchased two companies, and we've recently divested those two companies, and one to IBM, one to MasterCard. But a lot of it has to do with automating and understanding you at the drive-thru. So you come to the drive-thru, you order. There's a if you like AI, if you will, listening to your order, so that we can pull your voice, the ordering voice, out of all the background noise, and maybe you've got kids in the car yelling and screaming, so that we can better get your order correct, right? So that it helps the human that's still there. Doesn't have to, excuse me, what'd you say? It gets better at taking the order, right? That's one thing that we do. So there's this voice, I'll call it recognition, but we don't recognize you as an individual, but we recognize that if three people in the car placing an order, we can start figuring that out. So it's making the order, your experience better by leveraging that AI technology to parrot back your order. You see it on the screen now, right? So when you order, you start seeing things on the screen, which helps us. Like, if you see something wrong, oh, wait a minute, that's wrong, and we can intervene and do something about it. Versus you drive around to the pickup window, you get it, you drive off like, my order's wrong, right? So think about how that drives a better experience for the crew, the time for that, and you, the consumer, by doing this voice recognition and embedding that directly into our point of sale system. That'd be a moment. If you want to see AI like live and happening to your listeners, it's not everywhere in McDonald's, but soon it will be, and you'll see AI at every drive-through, thousands of them around the world, right?
So I recall one time when we're in Chicago together, and there's a flurry of activity on your team, bunch of trouble tickets, change requests, things like that. And I asked what was going on, and you said, "Oh, there's an ad hoc pricing change. I don't know, something, a fillet of fish dropped by a nickel or something." And so I'm thinking, big deal. Doesn't it happen all the time? And you start explaining the complexity of deploying, maybe it's only a nickel for one item, but deploying that globally. Maybe just talk us through starting from the cloud on up, what's actually involved with making a price change.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, McDonald's corporate doesn't tell a franchisee what to sell a product at, right? But we run the systems that allow them to update, change if the pricing if they want to. What I'll tell you is the systems today we use for price and promotion, pushing out data to restaurants, pulling back data like inventory and sales and things like that. If you think about the number of endpoints involved in doing that, right? If we're talking about hundreds of thousands of endpoints, right, that need to be communicated to, updated, timely for something to happen, all of it acknowledged back the other way, right, and all of it working. Changing the price of something, it's got to go to the participating restaurants, right? You don't change the price for something that doesn't exist in the country you're trying to sell it in. There's a lot that goes into the understanding and the complexity of what price is updated, when does it get updated, where does it go, what currency is it in, the number of things like that, right? That we used to go around the world. If you add to that now the thinking that says, well, I also need to know is something available where I'm at, or I want to run specials based on the weather in a particular location, or something like that. You're now ingesting a lot of, I'll call it, external data to help you understand what it is you need to position for consumers to buy. And that adds the complexity to those, I'll call it those base systems, those back-end systems that do all the plumbing, if you will, moving data around. There's more knowledge we need to know and ingest. And it's becoming more and more timely that we want to do that.
So as technology has become a more integral part of, let's say in this case, the dining experience, versus, let's say, earlier in your career, what would you say are the challenges of being an IT leader when every organization is so heavily dependent on technology?
Yeah, I think the clear one is complexity, right? One of the things that you deal with is it's complexity in your solutions, it's complexity in your suppliers, the mix that you have for any given solution. There doesn't tend to be one supplier of everything in the world. And if you think about even a systems integrator that you might hire to say, hey, do all this for me, right? You haven't really reduced the complexity. You've just sort of masked it a little bit, because now they're facing all the same challenges, right, that you might have, to do that. So complexity is one. Two, the knowing, the stateful of knowledge of what's running where. Is it okay? Is it running? The just being the monitoring and awareness of what all's out there that you have running. And then I would say the one that's probably last but certainly not least is the security of all this, right? Now if I want to send you an offer in an app and tailor that offer for you so it's meaningful to you, I now need to know something about you. And of course you opt into that, but you trust me to keep your data secure. You trust me to only to guard that data, particularly if you have children's data. Think about Monopoly games and things like that. This idea that we have to be able to be quick, fast, be everywhere all the time, but be secure is probably the largest challenge, I would say. And we use AI in that space as well to look for things like we look for behaviors in our environment that are indicative of a problem in our environment, right? So an easy example is Joel logs into the mobile app in the USA in Chicago, which is where I'm at today. And then 20 minutes later, I'm logging in from the mobile app in the London, UK. That's problematic, right? And so that's an easy one to share. But there are much more nuanced behaviors that we use an AI behavior type, I'll call it systems, right? To listen into things that are going on that we didn't have, I would say, decades ago, right? It was firewalls and ports, and only let this in, let that in, but Trojan horse was let in, right? Much more nuanced in ways we guard that, right? With the complexity of data we have.
So in this show, we talk about AI, but seen specifically through the lens of data, and specifically, like what you were just alluding to, the responsibility that you as a vendor has with all the data that you collect and the decisions you make with it. In the past, you've given me simple examples that are maybe like that one with the Chicago and the London kind of thing. That one's obvious, but you've said we need to make sure we don't recommend to someone who's lactose intolerant that they buy a cheeseburger,
right?
And on down the line. But
yeah.
How does the organization think about the responsibility of using other people's data to make personalized decisions that obviously everyone's interested in improving the dining experience, but how do you trade that off with the consequences of potentially making bad decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think about McDonald's from a volume perspective, roughly, 60, high 60s, let's call it 70 million people a day come to McDonald's and eat, and we're trying to maximize that experience for them, right? As well as the potential. So the trick comes in when you tell us something about you. One, you expect us to remember it, and you expect us to know you everywhere you go. It doesn't matter where you show up, so that we can know things about you and individualize, if you will, the marketing to you. To your point about things that you like, which means in the past, if you think about it, McDonald's, if you're doing 70 million people a day, you're feeding the world's population every 100 days. If you look at the volume of transactions, marketing was very much at a macro scale, right? So, a big billboard or something on the Olympics, sponsor the Olympics for a decade, or you do something. So macro scale marketing, making an offer to you that incentivizes you is now mass micro marketing, right? So I'll give you an example. If when McDonald's decides that they're going to send a push notification in the app to let's say we're talking about just the US, a push of the app to the US might be 17 million customers, and they all don't want the same thing, right? But we do this every day, right? To do the things that happen. There's a lot of complexity of what we need to know, how accurate that is, how fresh that data is. Like, how do you figure out sometimes if you've got multiple sources for data, like location or something like that, what's the best way to run an algorithm to figure out what's the most likely accurate, place for that? So there's a lot of that we do, and we do partner with other companies that specialize in that to help us with those things, right? But the nuance is where it gets I think differentiates what a company's willing to do, to how far they want to go with that technology to make that unique experience for you in a world where you feed 70 million people a day, right? It's a difficult thing to do.
So as a technology leader, you are obviously expected to innovate, because that's how you gain market share and create loyal customers and repeat visitors, et cetera. But presumably, you're also, tasked with KTLO, keep the lights on. And
oh yes,
I know from spending time with you, a lot of the time is consumed by, the price changes or the things that are ad hoc. As a leader, how do you balance that need to innovate with kind of the focus on strategy versus the focus on tactics?
Yeah, I think there's one of the things we have to do often is remind ourselves, right? What it is we need to do. What are the priorities around things we do? So, for example, we've McDonald's has invested a lot, and as you've seen in the marketplace, in digital capability, right? In the last several years, right? So, a couple of interesting. I'll give you factoids about it. Right, I mentioned last year, 2021 was the company's strongest year in history. Part of that is the fact that the digital sales growth has gone from what essentially was almost nothing, if you want to go back 4 or 5 years ago, to last year it was $18 billion in digital transactions. That's the orders that went through digital. So, and $120 billion, if you think about the overall sales of the organization, roughly $120 billion, you're knocking on the door of 16% of the revenue. And the year before that, it was 8 billion. So you were 6%, now you're 16%. This trajectory is not stopping. So great. We built some digital capability. We focused on the features. We focused on the speed. We focused on that. There's a need to understand now what's at risk for the business if these things don't work, right? So if the digital piece doesn't work, there's a focus on how do you keep that lights on, right? How do you keep we do more transactions an hour than Amazon does. I mean, and we sell cheeseburgers, right? But we do more than it. So how do you keep all that running? How do you make sure that it's secure and all the rest of that? There's a huge focus on the lights on piece now more than ever, right? But part of it is you got to make those decisions between buy and build, right? You can buy reliable stuff, you can build reliable stuff. There's no such thing, as a 100% uptime for anything, but you begin to leverage the technologies that allow you to be nimble, flexible, and when things break, or things are exposed, they're contained, right? So you begin to containerize certain things. You learn how to spread risk. You get better at understanding the risk profile for a given thing that happens, and you by necessity learn to get better at that. I wish I could tell you that we were perfect. We're not, but we always strive to get better every day with that. And I think you'll see from the results, I would say from McDonald's, the growth we've had on the digital platform, we're doing pretty good.
Fast forward a decade from now, we're having a version of this conversation from the perspective of infrastructure and operations. What are some of the tasks that are dependent on humans today that you think will be fully automated?
I think a number of things, right? I think, when I think about help desk, and we have help desks all over the world, people call in, or service desks for issues, and our restaurants call in for things. I see much of that automated, right? I see the smart equipment and AI in the restaurant, not just from the touch point with the consumer, but in the operations of the restaurant. So, it's simple to talk about things like machines that know when they're about to break or things that are going wrong. I see this behavioral type AI on top of an operations to help reconfigure things to make things better. We're already using data and analytics to think about how a restaurant needs to be shaped or where it needs to go on a piece of property to make it easy for people to ingress and egress, et cetera. I see the operations. I see all of that maturing and then being applied to the individual. So imagine an individual has maybe a headset or maybe an eyepiece or something like that, and it's everything they need to know is at the ready for them to ask. If they only ask, it tells them, right? Or if they need operational procedures, or if there's an issue or a problem, no more. We get away from I'll call it the hardware of interface, to more wearables, more things that are intuitive to help you as a human being do what you want to do. Things like that, right? So imagine your wearables are letting you know how hot it is in your environment. It changes that for you, or it begins to anticipate things that happen, based on history, and starts informing you of things that you need to do, right? Or things that are going on, right? Like for instance, if you see a school bus pull up in a McDonald's, well, they probably see that too eventually when the kids walk in. What if they knew that a mile ago, right? And something was going to happen. So there's that. I think from particularly around the self-help, self-service, I think you'll see this AI will go big into that environment such that it's helping you or the owner, the crew person or the office person or whatever, get the things you need when you need them, with a simple wish that you have it, versus I got to go get onto this system to get my uniform, that system to get this training, this system. It's like, hey, how do you do this? And bang, it comes to you, right? Or I need something, it comes to you. I see AI playing a big role in how employees engage, as well as how crew and restaurants engage that way. I see money being a thing of the past, for example, in transactions, right? You come in, we know if you opt in with your whatever biometric you want to use or what we're doing, there's no money exchange, right? The security that will go up, that kind of thing.
I love the answer. And listeners of the podcast know I'm a big advocate for the fusion of humans and machines, not
Yes.
machines replacing humans.
Mhm.
But I'll toss this one out there anyway. It's kind of a softball. In the next decade, do you see machines eliminating jobs in IT, creating new ones in IT, or pretty much the same number of jobs, but they're just augmented by AI?
It's a great question. So I would say a bit of all three, right? I absolutely see AI removing some I'll call them tasks if you want to call them jobs, but I see AI removing a number of things that we do today, particularly around jobs that deal with quality assurance and things like that, because the AI will get better and better at being predictive about that. So those types of things. I see AI replacing jobs that are if your job is to look up information and report something to that, I see AI taking care of that, right? A number of things like that. That said, I do think it's going to create a whole new set of jobs right around what does that mean, right? To help AI even get better at what it does, or the other pieces of what technology does. I don't see it. I say I don't see it replacing things. I see it augmenting people to do even greater things that we're not even aware of today, right? Is how that works. But I think it will be a disruptor. I think that it has the potential to disrupt a labor force. But again, I think when we start thinking about AI applied to human beings across the board, and you start thinking about everything from health issues to other things where people can have wearables that communicate to their doctor, right? You're not going in for a visit, right? So you may not need that person that was the receptionist, but you'll need more people looking at more data, looking at more patients, handling things. You'll see that with restaurants, you'll see it with retail, you'll see it with all these things that I think will improve the experience and quality of life for everyone. But yeah, I believe it will change fundamentally what it means to be in IT, because I think everyone will be in IT. Let's put it that way.
Joe, I sent you a topic list for this discussion. I'm not sure we've covered a single topic on that list. And as a result, it's been a better conversation. We're bad out of time, but I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last question for me. You are a walking encyclopedia when it comes to McDonald's. Tell our listeners one fun fact that might not be obvious about McDonald's.
One fun fact that might not be obvious about McDonald's. I do a lot of talk sometimes. People, I got to clear it first and say, listen, it's real beef. Yeah, it's real chicken. It's this. I don't know why one of the McNuggets always looks like Louisiana. I don't know. I don't have all those answers, right? But what I'll tell you, some facts, whether fun or not, is it takes 2 million people to wake up every day and make McDonald's work. 2 million people in 120 countries. And what I will say to you is a little fun fact that may be appropriate for our time is we recently had our worldwide convention, which we do every other year. We skipped it in 2020 for COVID, but so from 18 to now 22, and 40% of the attendees were new to McDonald's to do that. And one special moment was when we did the opening ceremony for McDonald's, and it was really important to us. Was we had our Ukraine market represented at McDonald's, which was pretty cool to pull that off. When you think about McDonald's, McDonald's truly is a global company. We operate and feed people in 120 countries. We have farmers in most of those countries. We have supply that runs around the world. It is, to me, one of the most global companies there is, largely because of the touch point we have with the local people, local economies, the way things work within a given area of the world. It doesn't matter about who the government is or what the culture is. We find a way to make it work. That's McDonald's, right? Anybody who come to our convention would see all the flags from all around the world. We have more flags in our convention than the UN. I mean, that's McDonald's, and that's the thing you don't see from walking into your local McDonald's, right? You only experience it one way. So my fun fact would be that 2 million people make it work. They're all across the economic spectrum, all around the world. And we've reintroduced this idea of the McFamily. We kind of got away from it a little bit, but having Ukraine represented was quite special. And I think that's my fun fact.
Fact check me on this. I may be wrong, or my facts may be dated, but I think you once told me that McDonald's sells more toys than Hasbro
Oh
and
yeah,
Mattel.
we're the world's largest toy distributor. We sell something like 5 times the chicken KFC does, and you guys go ahead. But there's all we sell more. If we sell it, we are the number one consumer and supplier and provider of it. So
More
it doesn't
coffee
matter what
than
it is.
Starbucks and Dunkin'
Oh,
combined.
I mean, yeah, okay. Fun fact that I mentioned earlier in the program, the QSR, quick service restaurants, if you will, retail, we're the number one downloaded app. The number two is half our size, and number two is Starbucks. We sell way more coffee than Starbucks, way more chicken than KFC, way more toys than Walmart, move around the world. We just, I mean, it's part of that being that scale, that we're at, right? So I could go on and on about all those little factoids, and I'm sure you guys could look them up. I think we're like the second or third largest real estate owner or something like that, There's all those types of things, and I'll leave you with this. When Ray Kroc said he only wants to see, money and food, go across the counter, think about the store today where no money's coming across the counter and food's going out the door through to an Uber delivery person. But the idea is, you can no longer run a restaurant at McDonald's with a shoebox. You can't do it if it's not connected. If it's, if your app doesn't work when you come in. I mean, 58% of the sales, if you will, in the UK are digital. Right, 80% of the people in Spain do cashless transaction. Right, no one's doing it the way. I'm old, so no one's doing it the way my parents were doing it. That sort of thing. So it's an interesting place to be.
I love it, Joel. The time flew by. Wish we had more time as always. But thanks for hanging out.
Dan, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and again, just an iconic brand, but to think of it as these complex, 40,000 factories, and just I'm always amazed by the work that Joel and his team do, and just the amount of lives that are touched by the extended McFamily, like Joel said, and there's a lot of good that McDonald's does for the world. So, Joel, thanks for educating us. Always good chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. I'm your host, Dan Turchin of AI and the Future of Work, but of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.